You cast your vote for President Trump, a very strong supporter of President Trump. What does he need to do in order for him to make you vote for him next time around?
That's a good one. Well, I think when you look at President Trump, he is an economic nationalist. I mean, you have to understand, the United States is $21 trillion in debt, and there's no way we can sustain that magnitude of debt. So I think in terms of why he got elected, people voted for him because they felt they were not part of that other half. I mean, it was sort of frustration. So I think if the president continues to focus on domestic matters, getting the economy going, bringing jobs back. You just saw Apple making a $360 billion commitment to repatriate money into the U.S. I think those are the things that really resonate with him domestically. So I think as long as his domestic house is in order, he can continue to focus overseas. As you saw when the president gave his inaugural speech, he basically made it pretty clear to note that we were not going to meddle in the affairs of other countries unless they were of national security interest. So if you look at Iraq and ISIS, you can see obviously ISIS has been diminished considerably. We have the issues of North Korea. So in a way, I know, when I was in Africa myself, there's definitely a yearning to hear about what the U.S. position towards Africa is.
Does it mean that America is abdicating its responsibility as the lone superpower? We're talking about the moral obligation here, especially about democracy, about civil liberties, about rule of law.
I think you definitely see 2018. I'm very confident that you will see the U.S. administration very active in Africa, and I'm told sometime in the early summer there'll be an event that will be directed towards African heads of state, whether it be held here in Washington or be held in Africa somewhere. I think you will definitely see more engagement with Africa in 2018.
I agree with the premise about, you've got to take care of home first. You definitely do. But I also wonder about this idea of the job aspect of the dialogue, because part of jobs includes trade. And one thing is not disconnected to the other. So that's the thing that I don't really quite agree with.
They're not mutually exclusive.
They're not mutually exclusive by any means. And so if you're looking at creating jobs back here, one of the things I say when I'm out doing my speech stump is, when you're looking at jobs back here, if you're looking at creating manufacturing jobs, for instance, just take that as an example, who are you going to sell those to if you're not looking at other partners across the world, particularly Africa, given the size of its market, $3.4 trillion market. So they're not mutually exclusive. So I think that there's got to be a broader understanding of how those two things are connected, even if you're looking at not even the trade aspect, but just the fundamental goods and services aspect. One of the things that AGOA does, or using USXM does, is to purchase U.S. goods and services. So that's connected to the business element too. So you've got the jobs part that's connected to the rest of the world, and you've got just domestic business if you're looking at sales of goods and services. So somehow those two things have to come together. Even if you just sort of said hypothetically that's all we're going to do, you can't disconnect that from working with transparent governments or a democratic governance. You can't disconnect the two. You can't disconnect it from jobs, even just domestic jobs you can't disconnect it from. And you certainly can't disconnect it from trade.
I remember, in fact, the former U.S. President Barack Obama saying that even with the prosperity, without freedoms, for example, it is a form of fundamental poverty.